who does all this work? Is it the product managers? Do you have admin assistants, program managers? How do you actually do all of this customer engagement?
The real answer, us, all of us. There's no definition in engineering systems saying this is the PM's job or the TPM's job or the TL's job and let's throw it over the wall. We're all busy. There's enough to go around. So we're all involved. We all listen.
Quick note before we dive into the episode. I'm excited to share the DX Core 4, a new framework for measuring productivity that encapsulates DORA, SPACE, and DevX. We've developed the DX Core 4 through ongoing research as well as practical experience helping companies like Dropbox, Etsy, and Pfizer. To learn more about the DX Core 4 and how to use it, head over to getdx.com/core4. That's getdx.com/core4. Okay, well, Gilad and Amy, awesome to have you back for a second episode to continue covering your story. Thanks so much for your time today.
Happy to be here.
So last time on the podcast, we talked a lot about the shifts you're making, how your developer productivity initiative came to be, how you're thinking about measurement. Today, we want to talk about how you actually execute. And you guys suggested this. You said, hey, we should talk about operational excellence. And it took me a minute to understand what you actually meant by operational excellence. I've come to learn what you mean by operational excellence is really around communication and how do you engage with the rest of the company. But would love to hear from both of you. How would you define what you mean by operational excellence?
We're starting from the baseline of what does it take in order for the developers in the company to really trust us. That's actually the baseline. And in order to develop that level of trust, the very basic thing you need to do is say you're going to do something, make sure you do it at the time you said you'll do it, and make sure that you listen to the feedback. So when we think of operational excellence, the very baseline of that trust is to say, okay, this is a set of products and we treat ourselves like a production service. We want to make sure that everybody knows, hey, we can trust, like any other product that you buy off the shelf, we can trust that if we need our IDE to work, it'll work. We trust that if we need our cloud workspace to work, it'll work, kind of like electricity. And if not, if there's an issue, we know exactly who to go to. We know that they'll respond, that they'll listen. We know that if there's a bigger issue, they'll fix it. And we know that they care. So I don't need to worry about that. I can, as a developer, focus on my work.
Behind the communication, you need to back it up by actually high reliability, which goes back to treating it like a production service. That means we actually have SLA, we have dashboard for operational excellence, we have operational review, we have post-mortem, and really needs to become the team's DNA, that we have real customers. They are not, paying customers, but these are customers that use our service. And that is so ingrained into everyone. It goes into not just running the service itself, goes into documentation as well. Treat documentation also like production documentation.
Before getting more into what you're actually doing, both of you guys are so passionate about this and so rigorous in the way you're thinking about this. I'd love to get your views on, both based on past experiences as well as talking with other peers in the industry. What do you think is the biggest challenge or pitfall in terms of executing in the way you're talking about?
When we talk to our peers, we often hear about two big obstacles. One is to get leadership support, to really align the entire organization in believing this is the right priority. Because if Team A wants to do something and depends on Team B doesn't think it's important, it will never get done. And then the second obstacle, a lot of times, when you are pushing a new thing, is adoption. Even though it is markedly better experience, it still takes a lot of convincing of developers to change their behavior.
If you think of what we do from a product life cycle perspective, especially when it comes to migrations or adoption, you really do have all the different stages that you have with any other product. You have the early adopters, you have the chasm that you need to jump, you have the early mass majority, late mass majority. One of the things we're dealing with right now is the laggards for some of the products. And when you're dealing with laggards, your strategy needs to change. If before what we used is a lot of carrots, now we're starting to use a little more stick to a certain extent. We're using a little more tops down by having directors reach out to their teams as opposed to trying to show just the benefit of stuff. We're putting more firm dates to say, hey, this is when this system is getting shut off, which is stuff that we definitely wouldn't have done before.
So we've talked about what the kind of overall goals of operational excellence are and some of the biggest challenges and pitfalls. You guys at Snowflake are doing so much to execute in a thoughtful and deliberate manner. When we were talking a couple of weeks ago, midway through the conversation, I just thought to myself, wow, you guys are doing so much. Can you create a doc that just lists it all? So, myself and maybe people in the world can fully appreciate what you're doing. I would love for you both. We'll dive more into communication, goal setting, all those kinds of things. But in broad strokes, maybe give an overview or a list of all the different things that go into your rhythm of business and playbook.
So as we said, it starts from identifying what our main goal is. And our main goal, as we said, is to establish trust as much as possible and then to deliver with quality. So you need that baseline and then to deliver with quality. In order to do that, our playbook essentially said, okay, how do we establish trust with the different types of people that we have? How do we map who they are and figure out how to best communicate with each part of the team? When is the top-down approach the appropriate one? When is the bottom-up approach the appropriate one? What type of communication channels can we use? Is Slack enough? Is email enough? Maybe a product all hands or going to a specific team and doing a roadshow with that team so they feel like we're devoting time just for them, which we actually are.
Yeah, like I would probably summarize kind of the rhythm into 5 different things. One is that we have the weekly newsletter and biweekly part all hands where we meet all the engineering team in person. Second is every quarter we have a survey, and that result is super critical in our planning prioritization. The third one is we do lots of interviews at different levels, and PM do it, EMTL do it, I do it as well. And the first one Gilad mentioned is a roadshow that we do at all hands at the different teams, so that we can reach that team, give very customized information and get feedback. And the last one is, again, drive adoption, and it's top down and bottoms up with different approaches depending on like the life cycle of where we are, and also vary sometimes by team as well.
There's so much work that goes into this, and we'll dive deeper into specific examples. But overall, how are you finding the time? Who does all this work? Is it the product managers? Do you have admin assistants, program managers? How do you actually do all of this customer engagement?
We all do this. All the TLs reach out to customers as well. It's great for them to be involved and get the insights. Maybe a PM will join them if we want to help with how to ask the questions in order to bring the right data, just because we have some more of that training.
Yeah, it's basically part of the rhythm, part of the DNA. Be super intentional. A lot of things are built into our rhythm now. Every week we have ops review, and we also review communications and feedback as well.
In your view, what would happen if you didn't do all this?
So Gilad was there last year, so I can share definitely the before and after picture. And I have done similar things in my previous jobs as well. I think if you don't spend the time really to build that connection with customer, build trust, and then have that closed feedback loop, is that customer will feel not heard or worse, abandoned. They just don't know if anyone is working on this, if things are getting better. In the case when you are building a new solution and you are probably not spending as much time working on the old solution, which people are still using. Without that customer engagement, people will lose trust.
In order for people to be able to focus on their job, they need the tooling to work like electricity or like water. You just switch it on and it works. And you know that if there's an issue, you know exactly who to call. That's That's the status that we want to get to. And therefore, in order to get to that and have that level of trust, you need to treat people like true customers, listen to them, give them the insights of how are we doing stuff. All of those are baked into how we work.
I want to start diving more deeply into how you do different aspects of customer engagement. Something you shared with me a couple of weeks ago that I thought was really insightful was you mentioned that you try to plug into existing communication channels, just like you plug into existing developer workflows. Say more what you mean by this and examples of how you're doing this.
Okay, we'll give you two examples. One is when Gilad and I went to visit our developer center in Berlin and Warsaw. We can see, because of the time zone difference, a lot of the rhythm that we do that we thought was global actually didn't really work for them. We presented a product all hands. That's in US time zone. They actually don't watch that, and I don't watch the recording either. So a lot of updates that we thought were giving to everybody was actually not landing with them. Instead, they have local rhythms. The Berlin office, they have a Monday 30-minute stand-up site-wide every single day, every single week. And that was actually the best way to engage with that whole site, 150 engineers. So the next time when we had a survey or when we have an update, we actually use that forum. That was super effective. And then the other thing is, Product All Hands was, attended by supposedly, open to thousands of people, but not everyone attends. People mostly attend their monthly all hands in their team group. And that is usually between 50 to 100 people. And that is actually the most effective way to engage at a more of a local level. So that's what we started doing. So in the last 2 quarters, we attended about 12 different team all hands. And then before we went to the team all hands, we actually talked to the key influencers in those teams to understand their scenarios, their user journey, their pain points. So that when we go to the all hands, it's actually a very tailored message. We'll say for this product is a great life changer for this team. And this is a current adoption. And this is what are the early adopters saying about their experience. And these are the laggards that would love for you to kind of join the party and give us feedback so that we can make all of you life much easier. And at the end of the all hands, we always do a call to action. Again, to summarize, the places where you can get help, the new documentation, how to check adoption, what things have gotten better, how you can give us feedback. Just always keep that dialogue going. And then every 1 or 2 quarters, then we give a fresh update as well.
When we're talking about bringing tailored content, it means looking at the data for that specific organization and saying, okay, how many developers migrated from system A to system B in this specific organization? Where are they at compared to the rest of the company? Where are they at compared to other similarly sized groups? There's the aspect of having the listening session specifically for them, and then showing how what they're asking for fits or doesn't fit within the broader needs of the organization. It's making sure that we bring testimonials specifically from that specific group, so things can resonate with the people in the room. And then the last piece is tailoring the amount of time. Each team has a different rhythm.
Yeah, and also in those meetings, I think the thing that resonates with them is that we are very data-driven, right? Again, we show all the data from operational metrics, user journey, user experience metrics, output metrics, and then the quarterly survey metrics, so that they know we actually understand their journey, their experience. So that, again, goes back to building that trust and confidence.
What are some of the more notable questions or feedback, even criticisms you've gotten in these types of presentations? I'm really curious to know, what do you get back when you're in front of folks and sharing updates on your work and the data, asking for things? What do you get back?
With any migration, there are always 2 camps of supporters or detractors. So based on migration, I think at Snowflake or at any company that we have talked to, the decision is always controversial at the beginning because Bazel is not a tool that works for all the programming languages equally well. People are married to something they're very familiar with. And, when you are doing the migration, something are always not going to be quite on par. And even when you are done, you probably still have work to do to make it better. So that in this journey, we always have people who are, supporters or detractors. And it's always a journey to make sure the detractors also feel heard, that we are not just steamrolling them.
How do you influence and convert those detractors?
So we, a lot of times they actually help us in various different ways. So for example, in the Bazel migration, we want to improve build time. But improving build time is not just in the tooling. It's also in the product itself. So there are people who work on making the product boot faster, making the unit test, IT test, integration test, the infrastructure to be better, to be more lightweight, right? To share some of the, loading things so that we can be more efficient. So those are the people, at the beginning, they might not believe in Bazel migration, but then they are actually part of the bigger effort. And then they actually help the end-to-end output time. We talked about in the last podcast that the transformation is not possible without army of volunteers across the company. It's not just our work at all. Like we have tons of volunteers. And those are the people that really help move the needle so quickly in 6 months because they are experts in their domain and they believe in the mission and the whole company is aligned in that priority. So once they, again, are part of the journey and they see the effort, they see the result, and then it's easier to bring them along on the journey with us as well.
If you think of, there's a big debate in the industry, do PMs need to be technical? Yes, no, what are the advantages, disadvantages? In this space, the answer is 100% absolutely yes, but here's how rubber meets the road. The way to convert detractors or laggards is to have somebody who's a PM and understands how to ask questions and understands how to identify underlying pain points, but at the same time can launch the right environment and experience the pain with that person and really go through all the steps and replicate and have the discussion back and forth. And the folks on my team, I'm very lucky to have folks that can absolutely do that. And that enables you to establish that trust that, okay, it's not some PM that just wants to ask me a bunch of questions and then he has or she has no idea what that actually means in practice. No, they will go and they will try to recreate it and or reproduce it, and they'll try to see, do other people in other sides of the org face the same thing? That's how we jumped on a bunch of stuff. One of the examples was the experience of using C++ inside the IDE right now. That's a top concern area. So one of the PMs on my team just went and interviewed a bunch of folks, tried to recreate exactly what they're facing, saw where the IDE sync times were very problematic. And that's how it enabled folks to say, okay, they're not hand waving. They know exactly what we're going through. They'll probably solve it. So that's another way to bring the laggards or the detractors.
Another insight you shared in a previous conversation of ours was the advice of using insiders as your messengers. Elaborate on what you mean by this and examples of how you're doing that.
So a lot of times developers have a default higher trust level with people who are on the same team because they feel like they understand their lived experience. Versus someone who is outside the team, a central team, for example, like a ES team, to tell them use this and use that. So this is why it's very important for us to build the CAB, the Customer Advisory Board. And these are the people who are early adopters, who are so eager to make things better. They're eager to try better things, give us feedback. And again, we had so many volunteers and they saw how sausage was made. During the 2 quarters when we had so many volunteers embedded into making, the cloud workspace better, into making CI better, all of the feedback they had later on was, now I have so much more appreciation about the complexity both in the technical space as well as in the organizational space. And then they become very natural passengers going back to their team to, hey, this is something actually I worked on, or this is something I used, and I can tell you this is, much better. And going back to the example of the Berlin team, how they are a little bit disconnected because of a time zone difference. So they had early adopters as well. So their early adopter then used their Monday Scrum to, again, demo Cloud Workspace to show them how this has improved his productivity by, 2x or 3x. And again, after that demo, we will see adoption for that site spike.
I'll build on what Amy just said. It's not always people with a specific title that are the influencers. It's not necessarily the TL or the EM or the director. In many cases, it's the person who's been there for a bit of time, or just, one of the things we did when we went to Berlin, when we went to Warsaw, when we talked to the teams in the US, is to go and try to identify those people trusted by the teams, who are those influencers, and try to spend a lot of time with them. We knew that investment of time, especially if we are able to convert a detractor who's an influencer into a supporter, and there are multiple ways of doing that. Anything from, a lot of chocolate and bribes. No, I'm kidding. Anything from listening and showing how the sausage is made, like Amy just said, and talking about where are we at right now and giving a true representation of the current reality without making it prettier or putting lipstick on the pig, and also showing what the future can look like. There are a lot of different ways, and once we've spent that time, they don't necessarily get converted into huge fans, but they can get converted to people who trust you enough to get their team to listen when you're trying to push a different change, a different enhancement. So we use a lot of those as well embedded in the teams. So, and that's both the early adopters and also getting from, say, early majority to late majority. Use those folks in order to get other people to try because they trust those folks on the teams.
I really like the insight you shared around how when you spend time on all hands or site visits that you go in there and deliberately try to identify and build relationships with the influencers. I think that's such a key step. You can't do this type of customer engagement. You can't communicate through the insiders unless you first identify who those insiders are, right? And I want to also double click a little bit on the customer advisory board. You just brought this up. Can you share with other folks who might be interested in doing something similar? How does that work? Who's in the customer advisory board? How do you get people in or out of it? And then what's the cadence of meeting? What are the activities, responsibilities? How does the customer advisory board actually function?
So the concept of a customer advisory board is something well known in the industry, and PMs fell in love with it a long time ago. The idea is very simple. In order for you to get a good picture of different types of customers at different stages of life and get all of them together to talk to each other so we can understand the underlying pain points and also share some of our longer term thinking or specific designs for all six of the matter. It's the two-way communication with that trusted group of advisors. What you usually do is you identify folks from different parts, in our case of the company, when you're talking about external products, different types of customers of different sizes. So you get a diverse group. Usually you vet them to make sure there are people who are vocal and want to communicate, but are not necessarily just your promoters. You absolutely want detractors in the room, and you want the balance. And then you need to do a really good job at moderating that forum such that you can get stuff out of it. To give examples of what you do in that forum, it's anything from let us share our roadmap or our upcoming quarterly plan. Tell us what you guys think. Let us show you a design of the the new pre-commit report that we're generating. Let us show you the design. Tell us whether this is going to solve the issues that you have. What's top of mind for you? There's some input questions. So what's top of mind? How do you get the members? It's anything from, we did a customer interview, and based on the conversation we had, we're like, this is the right type of person to bring into the cab. Through they get nominated by the directors on the team because they might be the right influencers or the right folks to communicate back and forth, or just the directors want these guys to represent the teams in front of us. So we've seen both work. And then finally, the entire goal is it's informal. There's no, you've got to attend every single meeting. You've got to be, no. The idea is these are people who care and want to make the company better. And therefore they will come and give us those insights. We give them insights internally to what we do and how we operate. So they do get purview into the sausage making to a certain extent, in the thinking. They get early access to stuff. We're playing around with an LLM bot right now for documentation. Those guys helped us dive deep and figure out what works and what doesn't work. That's how we leverage it for hands-on stuff as well. That's the idea behind the cab.
Several times today, you've brought up the Berlin and Warsaw development centers. I know fairly recently you actually visited these folks in person, right? You traveled to Europe to visit these sites. Tell me more about this and why it was important to go visit in person.
So let's first talk about the importance of being there, not just for us, not just for me and Amy. We had additional folks travel from the US to those offices. And when they travel, we had the folks on the performance team, our performance team travel. But when they travel, they don't just represent the performance team. They represent our entire broad team focused on developer productivity. They will listen to things. Sure, they'll have the specific meetings, but they will listen to things outside their purview because we want to keep that constant touch. When we went there, so we went there earlier than when most of the team went. We sent folks after we did, in order to establish that basic trust, and in order to get folks to know that there are faces behind this organization that's responsible to doing work.
When you are there, you understand how that time zone difference is such a drain on work-life balance a lot better. As well as, any challenge they have around their, local office setup, ISP, how that creates latency. And also just a local team, the areas they own, right? Sometimes it's a bit different from US. That can change their experience as well. So that understanding creates empathy, creates connection, creates trust. So that's why we went.
We've talked a lot about how you are engaging with developers, the folks who use your products. I want to ask you about managing up, right? Ultimately, executives are the ones funding all of your work and your organization. So how do you approach that?
The difference, I think, from what I see in Snowflake and in other places is a very engineering-driven company. Our co-founders, Benoit and Thierry, to this day, they still write a lot of code. So Benoit likes to say last year when their productivity had so many challenges, he stopped writing code and he was sad. And this year, after so many improvements, things are so much better and he is more prolific, writing code himself again, and he's much happier. So with the leadership being so hands-on, they understand that the work here is a multiplier in terms of impact and efficiency for the entire company. That's why, even when I go to, again, the all hands and talk to the engineering directors of product teams that, under pressure to ship features, they say their productivity is P0 for the entire company.
What do executives usually tend to care about? They care about bringing the right folks in that care enough, that are competent enough, and they can get stuff done such that the executive doesn't need to worry about it anymore. If there's a question, they will know how to answer it. If there's a challenge, they'll know how to deal with it, such that they can focus, the executives can focus their attention somewhere else. That's what executives usually tend to want. Our job throughout the last, 6-8 months was to get to a point when there's enough trust that if a meeting goes shorter, not longer, it's because, okay, these guys know what they're doing. Let them run. They showed us the plans. Makes sense. Go.
Final topic I want to cover today is how you set goals in roadmap. This is something I've seen a lot of different companies have different approaches. It's always a challenge. Firstly, I want to ask you, what is the cadence in which you are putting something out there saying, here's what we're doing, here's what we're going to do? Is it happening on a quarterly cadence similar to your survey or on a different cadence?
Yeah, so our planning at Snowflake is quarterly, and there's also annual planning. We're actually in the midst of the annual planning right now, but then we do quarterly planning to be more granular. The way we set goals is a combination of things. First of all, there's also always, so we use OKRs right now, and there's always the long-term goal in there in our North Star, which right now, at least part of it is around the developer sentiment, because we want to make sure that we do measure and see the change of that over time. We're actually experimenting with a slightly new way of doing road mapping right now, and especially prioritization. We're using something called thematic prioritization. If you think about it, the idea is very simple. If you focus on a ton of different projects, you'll end up peanut buttering yourself and not really move the needle enough for developers. So instead of focusing at the project level, you think of the main themes, or swim lanes, if you will, that can make a difference for developers. If I'll pick on, let me pick on Bazel for 1 second, or rather on our inner loop development. We have the Bazel migration. That's a big part of what we're doing right now. We have support for teams outside of the monorepo that I mentioned before. We have investments in the IDE. We have investments in making Bazel a top-notch product within Snowflake, and we have a bunch of others. If I try to invest in all of those themes, it won't fit. It just won't fit, or we won't move the needle enough. So what we said to the teams, tell us what are the up to 3 themes that you want to invest in this quarter, and what metric will get moved by investing in those themes. And everything that I just said has nothing to do with the actual projects. Only when you land on the needles you want to move and those themes, then you say, okay, now stack rank the projects in each one of those themes and decide which ones to do first. But that's a matter of what fits based on the amount of time you want to invest. If you said, okay, 70% of our time needs to be invested in finishing the migration to Bazel, then that's how you pick the items in that bucket. We're currently experimenting with this approach. It's something that a lot of companies in the industry did. What it really helped us do is make sure that we all sing to the same tune to a certain extent, and all the teams bring the themes to the table. And we're still trying to iron out kinks. And that's the other big thing that I want people to at least know. There's no one size fits all. There's no one solution that's going to work for everyone. Thematic prioritization is going to work for 80% of the teams and be completely irrelevant for 20%. The idea is for us to be flexible enough so at the end of the day, we plan with goals in mind, with customer impact in mind, but to give the teams the flexibility so they can focus on doing the work. We're also learning how to do that right now, but that's the mindset we're going into this with.
Yeah, I would say for planning and execution, it's really important to be both tactical and strategic. In the CI space, as an example, there's a long term, we need to rewrite the infrastructure. But if that takes a year, we need people to see incremental progress so that we build trust. So that's why when they do the quarterly planning, it's always a balance of both. Now we are, working on the second repo after the mono repo. Our architect, Nathan, when he works with that repo owner, is we need to work together. You need to give us volunteers that we work together as one team, because us as an outsider to the repo will not be able to really move the needle very fast. We need to work together as one team. And also we need to have two goals, short-term goal and long-term goal. Every quarter, we need to show developer how things are improving. We want to show that in the satisfaction survey. We want to show operational metrics. And also long-term, this is where we want you guys to be. We need to have both.
One last thing I really want to add, because I think it's critical to understand. Our job is not to define all the different processes and make sure everybody follows them to the T. Our job is to paint with brush strokes what the direction is and make sure we're all focused on customer engagement and customer satisfaction and customer value. And to bring in really strong, really talented people who care. And that's what we have on this team. That's what, at least I'm really proud of. I know Amy is really proud of that as well. Our TLs care. Our EMs care. Our ICs care and are involved in this, and they get a voice in the room. So we get to paint those broad brushstrokes of thematic prioritization, but then the team is doing the work. And as long as the mindset is not just churning out features, but rather bringing customer value and being able to measure that you've moved the needle for customers, go ahead, guys. Push as much as you can. You got the floor. That's the approach.
One question I have for you is, when you're publishing these themes, sharing these out with the organization, you mentioned that you not only discuss the themes, but here's the metric that these themes are going to impact. Is that all you're saying? Are you sharing, here is what we're going to impact? Or are you saying we are going to move this score by this much? And the reason I ask is, this is an area I see teams getting a little hung up on sometimes. Like, do you commit and put the metric out there? Or is this more talking about, this is the metric we're trying to impact to rationalize the investment?
Yeah, I think it depends on where we are. So for example, in the last 3 quarters for monorepo, while we had built up more context, we do commit to quarterly goal. And every month when we do review with ELT, we'll actually see if we're on track for the quarter, whether we are going to hit it at the end of the quarter. So we are now talking about the second largest repo where we don't yet know what is possible. So we're just talking about the metrics we're going to do. We have not set a goal. But once we have an idea, we will absolutely set a goal.
It's actually a part of the process. We set a target, the term date for date. That's part of what we're doing. We're saying, okay, we don't know yet, but we will know by November 15th what can be accomplished within a quarter, within 2. That's the line of thinking. We started off by setting very aggressive goals that weren't realistic in some cases. And we've skewed towards, okay, let us assess the work. Let us do the benchmarking. Let us figure out what's doable and then push as hard as possible and set goals for it. But I do want to remind people who are listening, metrics are not the goal. Metrics are a way to measure whether you've generated enough impact. If you've generated the metric didn't move enough, but a different metric did move, that could be great as well. Things change throughout a quarter or throughout whatever period it is. The metric is a way to make us accountable and see that things are changing, but it's not what we're chasing. We're chasing customer impact.
Yeah, I love your advice about, you mentioned in the past, you maybe just set goals to set goals and they weren't really achievable. So I think the takeaway here is that it's situationally dependent. If you know confidently how and if you can move a metric and are confident setting a goal, do so. But if you don't know enough yet, it's okay to say that and say, here's what we're exploring to understand the problem better, and then set a more confident goal. I also want to ask you, tell me about the long-term versus quarterly planning. So I think I have a pretty good sense of how you're setting themes and metrics and areas on a quarterly cadence and then reporting on those. What's different about the annual planning that you do? What is the annual plan? What does it look like?
The annual plan focuses on what is the North Star metric, what is our mission and vision, and then what are the main areas that we truly want to move the needle on, and what are the ones we're saying we won't get to. And it's really important to define the what will we not get to, or what will we say is not something we want to invest in right now. It helps the team focus. It helps them know where do we think that most of our time needs to be spent. It doesn't capture everything, to be clear, but it captures a lot of the big investments, and it allows us to funnel resources to the right problems and away from other problems. So we've got, as we said, we've got a really strong and talented team. We don't want to peanut butter them. We want to focus them on the right stuff. So the annual plan is a way for us to get buy-in from the company's leaders of here are the big investment areas and here are the ones we won't tackle. And once we have that, we can align the team to be more invested on those areas, to hire more folks for the right areas, to move people from one team to the next, to put more PM attention or TPM attention or data science attention on those areas. So that's how it's used to inform. It does not replace the quarterly planning. The quarterly planning is where we actually say, here are the work items, here who's assigned to what, here's how much capacity we have. It is not there to replace it, but rather it's there to set a baseline and make sure we're all rowing in the same direction. And now let's figure out the tactics.
And then all of this planning, the artifacts that you create in the process, how are you then distilling that down to share? I assume, for example, with the entire organization, you're sharing something that says, here are the themes for this quarter, for example. Like what does that look like? And then are you going into more detail with certain executives? Like what are the different formats and zoom in, zoom out levels of this information that you're sharing out with others?
We share them with many different forums at different levels, and actually repeat ourselves quite a lot. The annual plan is not just for our team; it's for the entire company. So that is publicly shared, and everyone get a chance to weigh in and review. So next week, for example, the extended LT will review plans across all the different teams, and that will be sent via email, shared also in part of our hands with the entire company, not just ourselves, but everything. And then with our stakeholders and then, the teams, we also plan to do the next round of roadshow to share, for next quarter, for next year, this is what we plan to do. And, this is where I need your help. And this is where, we'll help you to move your key metrics. And then in that process, we will refine. Once we set a goal, it's not always absolutely set in stone. In the quarter, there is also some flex as well. When things change, we'll always prioritize something that come in last minute as well.
The important piece is the two-way communication, and knowing that even though, sure, we're the chief repetition officers, right? We repeat the message again and again. We've got different audiences. We want the team to be bought into it, and we want to listen. For instance, we'll have a forum with the TLs to make sure that they go through and are aligned with where do we think we need to invest, both on the quarterly level and also at the yearly level. Is this the right stuff? We will reach out to the CAB, as we mentioned before, the Customer Advisory Board, to get their insights on it. We'll engage at different levels, and sometimes it's a slides presentation, and sometimes it's a Google Doc, and sometimes it's a Jira set of items. It depends on the audience. It really does. But the idea is it's not us publishing something and the world needs to cope. It's a two-way street. It's a discussion. Things can change throughout the quarter, throughout the year, and it's totally fine. We want to have a baseline so we make I'll put it this way. We want our decisions to be explicit and deliberate. It doesn't mean that they can't change. It means that there needs to be thought behind it, and we've made a decision together, and now we're running as fast as we can and as diligently as we can with the highest quality that we can to fulfill that. And if new information comes in, by all means, let's discuss. Let's change our plans. Let's change direction. We're flexible enough to do that as long as we're deliberate and explicit at what we're trying to do, and everybody is aware such that they're not surprised. And that brings back the trust factor that we talked about.
Gilad and Amy, thanks for your time again today. Always a pleasure to learn about your journey at Snowflake and all the insights you've been able to share with others. Thanks so much for the time and really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.